materials and the infinite market they have created. In particular, Korea holds the title of world's first and world's best and is showcasing its outstanding technological prowess in the global market. Based on outstanding ideas, systematic policies for metamaterial research should be supported so that we can win the global technology hegemony war. We look forward to Korea's technological prowess that will lead the metamaterial market, the game changer of the future industry.
전 세계가 주목하는 K-pop 댄스 스테이지. 스타를 향한 열망, 무대를 향한 뜨거운 심장. 전 세계 지역 예선을 거쳐 선발된 300여 명의 재능 있는 루키들. 새로운 퍼포먼스를 선보입니다. 대한민국 최고 K-pop 댄스 마스터들의 1대1 코칭. 매 순간이 성장의 기록. 모든 참가자는 프로그램 안에서 자신만의 역사적인 데뷔를 완성합니다. K-팝의 심장 대한민국. 꿈을 향한 여정이 시작되는 이곳에서 여러분도 세계를 움직일 준비를. K-pop 댄스 스테이지. 이제 그 무대의 주인공은 당신입니다.
The Korean wave is drawing more fans from all over the world. Local consumer prices continue to hover at the 2% since rate in April.
Turning to robots to allow the visually impaired the chance to better indulge in cultural experiences. Like the number of hybrid cars are registered in South Korea has surpassed 2 million using its locally developed Yuri rocket.
Arirang.
Kyongju, a city that holds 1,000 years of history. The cherished values preserved over time have shaped who we are today. Now, through new encounters, we step into a better future. Sustainability, innovation. With the spirit of connection, a new millennium story begins. As APEC and Kyongju come together. APEC meets Gyeongju.
The moment we wear it, our spirits lift. It helps us grow strong in body and in mind. As we wear it, we learn patience and respect. The belt system motivates students to strive harder and continue growing. This uniform shapes movement into grace and turns performance into something thrilling. Now, embraced around the world, Taekwondo shares our culture, philosophy, and values with pride and spirit. Though it may seem simple, this uniform holds your passion and your journey. It belongs to Taekwondo. Wear the extraordinary. Be with Taekwondo.
President Lee Jae-myung has embarked on a 5-day trip to New York to attend the UN General Assembly, his first since taking office. He'll address the assembly on Tuesday and hold a series of meetings with global leaders and investors. And ahead of his New York visit, President Lee said in an interview that South Korea could face a financial crisis if Seoul accepts Washington's investment demands without safeguards, such as a currency swap arrangement. And for the first time since U.S. President Donald Trump's return to the Oval Office, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has spoken out about the possibility of re-engaging with him, reflecting on his, quote, good memories of Trump. We begin with President Lee Jae-myung's upcoming debut at the UN General Assembly. He's set to deliver an address to the Assembly on Tuesday, while all eyes are on if his 5-day New York trip will include a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. Our top office correspondent, Song Yoo-jin, starts us off.
South Korea's presidential office says President Lee Jae-myung's trip to New York for this year's United Nations General Assembly will mark his full-fledged debut on the multilateral stage. Lee's first overseas visit after taking office in June was to the G7 summit in Canada, but this time the stage is far bigger, with some 190 heads of state and government expected to attend. While the president has several events lined up during his 5-day trip, 2 stand out. The first will be his address to the UN General Assembly on Tuesday local time.
Through this address, President Lee will declare South Korea's restoration of democracy, outline his administration's vision for the Korean Peninsula, and share how we can contribute to global peace and prosperity.
Much of the attention will be on Lee's message on North Korea as Seoul continues to extend overtures for dialogue despite Pyongyang remaining hostile. Another major highlight will come on Wednesday when President Lee chairs an open debate at the UN Security Council, the first time for any South Korean leader. This was made possible by the country's rotating presidency of the 15-member body this month. The theme will be artificial intelligence, international peace, and security.
Overall, it enhances South Korea's diplomatic standing and provides an opportunity to advocate for issues important to the country and to the broader international community.
Eyes are also on the bilateral meetings Lee will hold on the sidelines. National Security Advisor Lee Seong-rak said the president is expected to meet with leaders of France, Italy, Uzbekistan, the Czech Republic, and Poland. But the big question is, will there be a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump? Lee said no summit is scheduled, but did not rule out an encounter at the UN headquarters. One expert says even a brief exchange could be significant, as ties between Seoul and Washington face uncertainty due to stalled trade negotiations and the recent detention of Korean workers in Georgia.
It would be good to reaffirm the positive chemistry the two leaders showed at the White House last month. Even if detailed discussions on tariff deals aren't possible, if they can demonstrate some unity, I believe it could have a positive impact on the negotiations that are currently at a standstill.
President Lee will arrive in New York on Monday local time and return home on Friday. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
And right before he departed for New York, President Lee said Washington's investment demands could spark a financial crisis here, unless there are safeguards like a currency swap arrangement. Our Moon Jeong has more.
President Lee Jae-myung warned the nation's economy could face a repeat of its 1997 financial meltdown if Seoul accepts Washington's current demands in stalled trade talks without sufficient safeguards. He delivered this stark warning during an interview with Reuters in his office on Friday, ahead of his trip to New York for the UN General Assembly.
통화 스와프가 되지 않는 상태에서 3,500억 달러를 인출해서 지금 미국이 요구하는 방식으로 전액 현금으로 송금 투자해야 되는 상황이라면 대한민국은 다시 IMF를 맞게 됩니다.
This stems from a verbal trade agreement made in July. The deal aimed for the U.S. to lower tariff on South Korean goods in exchange for $350 billion in investment from Seoul. However, disagreements on how this investment would be handled have prevented the final signing. An expert echoed President Lee's concerns regarding the potential impact of such capital outflows.
Take into account the potential impact of the sudden outflow of the cash in terms of the international U.S. dollar. That is a really serious burden for our country's financial status in terms of the international settlement currency reserve.
In fact, South Korea currently holds about $416 billion in foreign exchange reserves. This means that the $350 billion investment deal would account for over 84% of the total reserves, posing a significant challenge to the nation's financial stability. The urgency for a solution lies in the lack of a standing currency swap arrangement. Such arrangements allow countries to exchange their currencies to help stabilize their financial markets in times of crisis. Historically, South Korea and the U.S. have signed these arrangements only twice, during the 2008 global financial crisis and the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. On the other hand, Japan presents a stark contrast. It boasts more than double South Korea's foreign exchange reserves, with a $550 billion investment package accounting for 42% of its total. Crucially, Japan's yen is an international key currency, and it maintains a permanent swap line with the U.S. This provides a robust financial safety net, a luxury South Korea lacks as it does not hold a key currency itself. 문지영, Arirang News.
Now on North Korea, President Lee said he's open to a deal between the North's Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump, in which the regime agreed to freeze its production of nuclear weapons. Our Park Jun-han has the details.
In a bid to ease long-standing tensions on the Korean peninsula, South Korea's President Lee Jae-myung has suggested what he described as a realistic solution to North Korea's nuclear program, emphasizing a freeze on weapons production over immediate denuclearization. Speaking to the BBC ahead of its departure for the U.S. on Monday to chair a UN Security Council meeting, Lee described such a freeze as an interim emergency measure that could halt Pyongyang's annual production of 15 to 20 additional nuclear weapons. He called the plan a feasible, realistic alternative while maintaining the long-term goal of full denuclearization. President Lee said rebuilding trust between South and North Korea is crucial, particularly given the previous Yoon administration's aggressive approach toward Pyongyang, adding that he believes these steps will encourage the North to resume negotiations. In an interview with Reuters on Friday, Lee said he has sought to ease tensions with North Korea, but Pyongyang has rejected Seoul's outreach, leaving him doubtful about the near-term prospects for inter-Korean dialogue.
북한이 대화 자체를, 접촉 자체를 아예 거부하고 있기 때문에 남북 간의 소통, 대화, 협력은 당분간은 어려울 것으로 판단이 됩니다.
However, North Korea has been rejecting approaches from the Lee administration with sharp criticism. In a Supreme People's Assembly address over the weekend, Kim Jong-un clarified that unification is impossible and classified the two Koreas as completely incompatible entities that are two separate states with no need for shared endeavors. Kim emphasized that denuclearization is meaningless for North Korea, which declared itself a nuclear power in 2022, vowing never to give up its nuclear arsenal. Despite the hostility towards Seoul, Kim left the door open for talks with Washington. During the address, Kim recalled personal interactions with U.S. President Donald Trump and suggested dialogue could resume if the U.S. abandons its denuclearization fixation and recognizes North Korea as a nuclear state, paving the way for peaceful coexistence. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
So, for the first time since U.S. President Donald Trump returned to office, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has expressed his openness to reviving talks. Now, experts told Arirang News the timing could be sooner or later, but the conditions remain as tricky as ever. Oh Soo-young reports.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has signaled he is ready to talk again with U.S. President Donald Trump, according to experts in Seoul, with a summit on the cards within a matter of weeks. In a speech to the Supreme People's Assembly, the North's highest political organ, Kim for the first time spoke out on the possibility of re-engaging with Trump. He said he still personally has good memories of the U.S. president, alluding to their meetings during Trump's first term. Kim said there's no reason they couldn't face each other again if Washington abandons its goal of North Korea's denuclearization. One expert remarked on the timing.
I think he's simply ready. Victory's Day of the China. He also have a backup from not only Russia but also China, and he's ready for this some kind of confrontation or dialogue, negotiation with the United States.
After returning to presidency, Trump has expressed eagerness to revive North Korea diplomacy, which Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong notably did not rule out in her media statements. Now with a nod from Kim Jong-un himself, experts say the next Trump-Kim summit could be within several weeks, as the US leader is scheduled to visit South Korea to attend the APEC leaders meeting next month.
If President Trump were to lower the bar for dialogue with Kim, shifting the focus away from denuclearization toward arms control and tension reduction, then a summit could take place right after APEC, either at Panmunjom or at the Wonsan-Galma Coastal Tourist Zone.
Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Trump, in fact, floated the possibility of such an occasion during their first summit in D.C. last month. But once again, the question of denuclearization will continue to linger. In 2019, Trump and Kim's second summit in Hanoi broke down as the US leader called for a big deal to fully dismantle all of North Korea's nuclear facilities. Since then, Pyongyang has continued its weapons program and has growingly asserted itself as a nuclear state.
Kim Jong-un sent a message to Trump that he could meet the Trump but with some precondition. For example, United States has to stop the permanent halt of the U.S. military exercise, and also the deployment of the strategic asset.
The key question is whether President Trump will accept Kim's demands. Trump has hinted at recognizing North Korea as a de facto nuclear state. The U.S. defense chief has echoed similar views, but the Secretary of State has maintained a firm commitment to denuclearization. Any Trump-Kim summit would therefore require reconciling these divisions within the U.S. administration.
South Korea's presidential office on Monday reiterated Seoul's support for the resumption of U.S.-North Korea dialogue. Regarding Kim's statements that denuclearization is impossible, the office emphasized that South Korea will continue efforts for a Korean peninsula free of nuclear weapons. With the possibility of Trump-Kim diplomacy in the near future, experts say close coordination between Seoul and Washington is more critical than ever. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The 2025 APEC Main Week will be held in Kyongju from October 27th to November 1st, with the last 2 days for the members' leaders meeting. This is according to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on Monday. Now, this year has already set a new record, the ministry said, yielding 14 distinct ministerial meetings and 21 joint agreements. A comprehensive joint statement is set to be adopted following the Foreign and Trade Ministers' meeting, encompassing year-long achievements from various high-level talks. Now, as the chair nation, South Korea has spearheaded key agenda items, including cooperation on artificial intelligence and responses to demographic shifts. Amid the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, several countries, including G7 nations, have moved to recognize Palestine as a state, with more expected to follow. But this has drawn a sharp backlash from Israel. Our Park Kwon-woo has more.
4 more countries have joined the list of those recognizing Palestine as a state. They include 2 G7 countries, the UK and Canada, marking the first time such economic powerhouses have taken the step.
We recognized the State of Israel more than 75 years ago as a homeland for the Jewish people. Today, we join over 150 countries who recognize a Palestinian state also.
The Palestinian Authority welcomed such a remark, calling it an important and necessary step to achieve lasting peace. And similar remarks for Palestine's recognition came from Australia and Portugal, also on the eve of the United Nations General Assembly, resulting in at least 151 of the 193 UN member states now recognizing Palestine's status. However, the U.S. called such actions performative, adding that its priorities include the release of hostages. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also strongly rejected the country's move.
For those leaders who recognize a Palestinian state after the horrific massacre on October 7th, you are giving a huge reward to terrorism. And I have another message for you. It will not happen.
While saying he'll fight against the false propaganda and the calls to establish a Palestinian state, he hinted at more messages coming towards the international community. Alongside these moves, countries including France are expected to back a Palestinian state at the UN later this week. But as countries including South Korea have not yet confirmed their status on a Palestinian state, eyes are on now how many more countries will move to recognize Palestine in the coming days. 박건우, Arirang News.
Now, down in Kyongju City, the host city of APEC 2025 Korea. With the event just about a month away, Kyongju is holding several events to promote its cultural heritage. Our An Sung-jin tells us more.
As APEC 2025 Korea approaches, the host city of Gyeongju is filled with cultural events. And the Silla Kings Festival is just one of them. Hosted by Gyeongsangbuk-do Province, the event aims to promote the 1,000-year-old history of the Silla dynasty, which had Kyongju as its capital. From trying out hanbok to exploring traditional Korean games, local residents and visitors have come to enjoy the vibrant atmosphere.
We got to try out traditional hanbok.
It was a great chance to understand the history of the Silla dynasty.
We happened to just pass by while walking around, but the music made us curious. It's an interesting experience.
The highlight of the festival was an interactive media performance and Silla-style traditional hanbok showcase, providing a glimpse into the Silla dynasty's history and culture. Further building on the success of this event, the city will be hosting a wider range of programs at its historical sites to further promote the city's cultural heritage and APEC 2025 Korea. An Sung-jin, Arirang News, Kyongju.
K-pop isn't the only Korean sound reaching the world. A group of international artists is breathing new life into Korea's traditional music, blending kugak with rhythms from every corner of the globe. Our Park Hyo-bin has our story.
K-pop may have crossed borders, but Korea's traditional music, kugak, is also finding a global voice. On stages where the Taegum and Kyonggi minyo once stood alone, accordion, African drums, and Mongolian strings now join in. At the center is Soundtrack, an ensemble of foreign musicians breathing new life into kugak. Members come from diverse backgrounds, yet a single curiosity about Korean sound brought them together.
About 10 years ago in Mexico, my Korean teacher played Arirang in class, and that's when I first fell in love with kugak, especially Kyonggi minyo.
For me, it's not so long time ago because I came to Korea 2 years ago. I wanted to know more about culture and, of course, music. Because I play flute, I was like, there must be a flute in Korea too. And then I started slowly getting to know through Taegum.
After a rigorous audition last April, the group trained for 5 months under master musicians. Their debut came in August on an international stage in Uzbekistan. Soon after, they were invited to the Yeongdong World Traditional Music and Arts Expo in South Korea. For them, kugak is more than performance. It's both an art and a responsibility tied to Korea's cultural roots.
We got chosen out of like how many people, right? So of course excitement was there, but at the same time the sense of like pretty high responsibility. We are playing Korean traditional music, which is I think a very special music.
Rather than simply recreating tradition, they blended kugak with instruments and techniques from their own cultures, creating original arrangements. As one member put it, no matter where an instrument comes from, its purpose is the same: to move people's hearts.
In every country, instruments are the same. They come from the human heart. Wherever you go, traditional instruments carry people's stories.
For these foreign musicians, kugak's power lies not only in its melodies but in its emotions, particularly the concept of han, which means a deep lingering sorrow and resilience that's at the heart of Korean culture.
For me, it's the emotion, the feeling that is coming with kugak. And for us as foreigners, it's of course difficult to say that we understand kugak and the feeling han itself. But I feel trying to understand or getting close to it. I never felt that in my life before when I played the European 전통 음악.
Beyond their music, Soundtrack has a clear mission: to introduce Korean traditional music to a wider global audience and break down the barriers that often confine cultural heritage.
I want to put the boundaries down that all the other foreigners are afraid to touch kugak, like you said. I want to be maybe it's a big word, but kind of an ambassador to show that it's possible. So music is for the world, so I want to show that to everyone.
With every note, Soundtrack turns kugak into a language beyond borders, a living dialogue where tradition meets the world. Park Hyubin, Arirang News.
Time now to look at what's been happening in the world of sports. For that, we have our sports editor, Paul Neitz, joining us in the studio. Welcome, Paul.
Hello, yeah, thank you.
So why don't we start with Heung-min's incredible start to life in his Major League Soccer. Another goal.
Another goal.
Impressive.
And yes, another win as well. And the latest came on Sunday, local time, as LAFC beat Real Salt Lake 4-1 at home. Son scored the goal that gave LAFC the lead, making it 2-1 just before half-time, firing in from outside the box for what was his first in a home game. Son got an assist for the equaliser as well, setting up Dennis Boanga. He's now got 7 goals and 3 assists in 7 matches and 4 goals in his last 3. On Wednesday last week, Son got his first MLS hat-trick and a 4-1 win against the same team, Real Salt Lake. The win meant that LAFC have booked their place in the playoffs. They now sit 4th in the Western Conference, 7 points behind San Diego in first, but with 2 games in hand.
You know, Water Star LAFC could even win the Supporter Shield then, you know. Now, moving on to baseball, Kim Ha-sung seems to be fitting well in at his new club, the Atlanta Braves.
Yes, you're quite right. Shortstop Kim Ha-sung played a big role as well in his team's win over the Detroit Tigers. On Sunday, he extended his hitting streak to 9 games in the process, a home run in a 6-2 win over the Detroit Tigers. And throughout, Kim went 1 for 3 with 2 RBIs, 1 run and 1 walk. This came after getting the run that put the Braves ahead in the 9th inning in the match before a 6-5 win. In that match, he went 1 for 4, and with a score at 5-4, he singled to right field. Since his move, his batting average has been at .313, up compared to his time with the Rays, where he was batting at .214 from 24 games.
Paul, moving on to badminton, world number 1 An Se-young, she just needed, 33 minutes to win the China Open final.
Yeah, incredible. She beat Han Ri of China 2-0 on Saturday to win the China Open, and did so with set scores of 21-11, 21-3 at one point, and had built up a 10-point lead early in the first game and only seemed to get stronger in the second, despite her opponent being world number 3. Her head-to-head now with Han Ri is 9 wins and just 2 losses. This was Anne's 7th title of the season, but first since the Japan Open in July. Up next is the Korea Open in Suwon on Tuesday, which she last won 2 years ago.
And lastly, to tennis, we had the Korea Open, and it was this year's Wimbledon's winner who claimed the title, right?
It was indeed, yes. Iga Swiatek on Sunday won the Korea Open here in Seoul. It was her 25th WTA title, beating Ekaterina Alexandrova of Russia 1-6, 7-6, 7-3, 7-5. The match went on for 2 hours and 43 minutes in front of a good crowd of 9,500. It was Swiatek's first Korea Open appearance. Alexandrova, who won the competition in 2022, was trying to become the first player to win the Korea Open multiple times. Meanwhile, also on Sunday, Barbara Krejcikova and Katerina Szyakova won the doubles title. They beat Maya Joint of Australia and Katie McNally of the U.S. 6-3, 7-6, 8-6. It was their 18th title together.
Wow, great stuff as always, Paul. Thank you as always for the wrap-up. I'll see you next week.
Thank you, yeah.
Unlike the cool mornings and evenings, the daytime is still hot at around 25 degrees Celsius in autumn sun during the day. In particular, the lowest temperature in APEC fell into the single digits, with 9.9 degrees this morning. However, it rose to 20 degrees during the day, showing a huge daily temperature range of more than 10 degrees. More rain is forecast across the country this Wednesday. It will start to rain on the south coast tomorrow night and will spread across the country on Wednesday. Rain will mostly stop on Thursday night. Tomorrow morning, Seoul and Gwangju will start off at 18 degrees, Chuncheon at 15 degrees. Daily highs move up to 27 degrees in Seoul, Gwangju, and Busan, Kyongju 24 degrees. There will be frequent rain with this cool weather this week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.
해금은 두 줄로 된 한 악기인데 저도 처음에 시작하게 된 거는 그 두 줄에서 너무 다양한 소리가 나오는 게 너무 신기했고 일단 해금이 되게 사람의 목소리랑 좀 비슷하다고 많이들 하세요. 줄을 눌러서 이렇게 음을 계속 왔다 갔다 진동하는 그런 형태를 띠고 있다 보니까 애절하다라고 많이 말씀을 해주시는 것 같아요. 이 곡은 제가 좀 오래 좋아했던 친구에 대한 제 여러 감정을 담은 곡인데요. 슬펐던 마음, 혹은 뭐 고마웠던 마음, 이런 여러 가지 감정들을 한데 묶어서 마음이 담긴 곡이라고 할 수 있습니다. 현대적인 음악으로 이제 재구성하는 단계를 거칠 때 항상 중요하게 생각하는 거는 음악의 분위기를 해치지 않는 선에서는 뭔가 전통적인 주법들, 식임새, 이런 전통의 냄새라고 할까요? 맛? 이런 걸 살릴 수 있는 요소들을 좀 집어넣으려고 하는 편이에요. 저는 요새 연주하면서도 스스로가 마음도 편하고 몸도 편안한 음악들을 좀 자주 들려드리고 싶다. 제가 음악으로 위로받았던 것처럼 제가 하는 음악들로 여러분들이 좀 위로받을 수 있는 순간이 있었으면 좋겠다. 그런 무대를 만들려고 노력해야겠다라는 생각을 했던 것 같습니다.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운 것을 받아들였다.
함께여서 우리는 더 자유롭고 더 멀리 갈 수 있어.
닫힌 문이 아니라 열린 질문으로.
나에게 APEC은
자유,
융합,
국제성,
다양성, 포용,
개발.
신라의 정신이 APEC 2025로 이어집니다.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gan. As South Korea-U.S. trade negotiations stall, major sticking points remain, especially over how Korean investments in the U.S. will be structured. The talks, initially aimed at easing tariffs and protecting key export sectors, are now delayed, with ripple effects already hitting Korea's auto and steel industries. The U.S. is applying pressure through the same high-stakes model it used with Japan, raising concerns over economic control and sovereignty. And with hopes for progress at the UN General Assembly fading, global attention is now turning to the upcoming APEC summit, where Presidents Trump and Xi are expected to meet, potentially shifting the direction of global trade. Now, for a deeper discussion on this, we connect to Kim Jong-un, professor at Seogang Business School. Big welcome.
Thanks for having me.
And also joining us is Heung-min Lee, assistant professor of economics at Montclair State University. Good to see you, Professor.
Good to see you again.
So let's start right away with Professor Kim. The tariff negotiations between Seoul and Washington is on stall currently. What are the current points of contention, especially over how Korean investments in the U.S. should be structured?
I think Korean government and U.S. government has an agreement on how much they're going to make an investment. But the issue is that who controls Korea's investment in the U.S. and what kind of financial safety issues we can have protection in Korea when we're trying to make an investment. Basically, the U.S. government is trying to push for Japanese-style model in which the U.S. has a strong control over where and how the money used. But the Korean government, of course, they want more flexibility, phase funding, and especially for the safeguard. So a big outflow does not shake its currency and banks as it is our financial status. As Korean President Lee, he warned that accepting the current demand structure could risk a crisis like a IMF crisis in 1997. So basically the Korean government is asking for the guardrails or basically the safety. So they're trying to have the full swap issues in the foreign current exchange, but the U.S. is trying to asking more where they want to control their investment in the U.S. territory.
Right. Now, speaking of who gets to control a lot of the factors, let's take a look at Japan's case. You know, they agreed to a $550 billion investment MOU that basically gave Washington control over how the money would actually be used. Then, Professor Lee, why do you think Japan has accepted those kinds of terms?
Yeah, as you know, July 2025, Japan was one of the first countries to actually come up with this tariff agreement of 15%. And that was from the demand from the United States that without this investment pledges that there was going to be an increase in tariff rate to 25%. So there was no really option for Japan, and they lowered it to a 15% tariff in exchange for the $550 million investment. And since then, there has been some confusions where there was an issue with the tariff stacking, whether the 15% that was agreed between the two countries will be actually added on top of the existing tariffs, or whether it's going to be a 15% across all industries and products. Later on, the confusion was cleared out, but obviously because Japan was one of the first countries to do so, it's been an important role and really from the perspective of Korea to see what Japan is doing. And in September 2025, an MOU was signed between the two countries where Japan will kind of look at, and also the United States will also talk about who gets to control some of the investment profits, given that the U.S. is interested in the profits in the United States and what investment and how much investment will be actually made. And without any promises, what if Japan somehow does not follow through with some of the investment amounts, then the U.S. might also raise the tariff rate. So in that regard, as you can see, some of these agreements are important for Korea because it sets the precedent, and future negotiations moving forward, it's an important factor for Korea as well.
Yeah, right, definitely. So Japan's example could tell us a lot about how Washington is approaching Seoul right now. So then regarding this, Seoul has actually stressed that its situation is quite different from Japan's. Professor, do you think this argument from Seoul will carry weight in Washington?
From my personal assessment, it probably won't carry much of weight because the United States is quite focused on their own trade deals and investment agreements, as the key focus of this issue is the national security. And without this, notion that, what kind of benefits Korea can bring to this table, where probably some of the sectors we saw with the shipbuilding industry being an important factor for Korea, and Korea does have some advantage since that there is a U.S. and Korean Assembly and Congress agreed Korea's FTA, where it's an actual law and an enforceable thing, where the two countries will have no tariffs. But with the given new trade and investment environment, where we now have a national security issue, it's difficult to make a case there. However, there's also optimism that Minister Yeo has a background in policy with the Moon administration, as well as a policy think tank in Washington. So there's no doubt that he and his counterpart will work out a nice deal. But obviously, he also has to be very careful with his comments with the media interviews as well. But with all this taken together, we have to know that moving forward, Korea and U.S. will be in a talk, and we'll have to see what will come out on top after these negotiations.
Right, so we'll have to keep close eyes on the developments. But let's kind of touch upon the impact of the latest decisions. So Japan's car right now face just a 15% U.S. tariff, while Korean cars are still at 25%. Professor Kim, how much does that widen the price gap, and what kind of impact could it have on Korea's auto exports?
I think it will hurt the competitive edge for the Korean car manufacturers. Basically, if I give you an example, if a car costs $30,000 before tariff, and then we're going to add tariff for the Japanese car, 50%, then it's going to be $34,500. But Korean cars, basically, we're going to have the 25%, and it's going to be $37,500 and $37,500. That's going to be a $30,000 gap on the same pre-tariff price. So when Korean manufacturers and Japanese car manufacturers compete in the U.S. market, basically our Korean car manufacturers will have some disadvantage on this the price sensitive market of the U.S. Indeed, it's very price sensitive market, but indeed they're very competitive market in the U.S. In the U.S. car market. Well, the German manufacturers and the U.S. manufacturers and the Japanese manufacturers and of course the Korean manufacturers, where they compete and they trying to have some edges, especially in the price. But due to those kind of disadvantage on the tariff, basically, the Korean car manufacturers will have a lot of issues on this competition in U.S. market.
Right, so it's quite concerning. The price gap sounds like a real competitive disadvantage for Korean automakers. So in light of this, Hyundai says that it will boost U.S. production from 40% to 80% to deal with the situation. But Professor Lee, do you think a company moves alone could make up for this? And what else do you suggest?
Well, companies do have the ability to move along in terms of those investment pledges, especially for foreign direct investment to the United States from a Korean multinational like Hyundai, where the company has the ability to expand. They already do have the plants in Georgia and Alabama and other states. That means that they can expand on the existing platform and infrastructures. And at the same time, Hyundai has been receiving state grants and subsidies from the U.S. side, so it will actually help. And given the promises during the July letter from the President Trump saying that there will be some lax regulations and some of the low regulations on those permits. So actually, Hyundai may see some advantage doing more business in the United States. Obviously, this came probably in response to some of the tariff threats where they're trying to reduce uncertainty in this investment environment. So that it makes sense to see that that's happening. At the same time, we have to also consider what's happening within the domestic side for Hyundai's production cost. We are seeing that some of the regulations and laws targeting the workers in South Korea is affecting the bottom line in Korea for Hyundai, and therefore they may have more advantages. So now we have push and pull factors for these investment decisions, and I think moving forward that's an important consideration to have.
Definitely. Now let's also shift our focus a little bit to the steel industry. So we are aware that it's also under pressure with a 50% U.S. tariff, and the government has announced a support plan worth 400 billion won. Professor Kim, will that actually help steelmakers on the ground itself?
Well, in my opinion, like the steel industry is one of the hardest industry that is going to be hit by the U.S. tariff, but they raised it to the 50%. But I think those kind of the government guarantee program will be help, of course, as a in the short-term period, but it's not going to be cure basically for the long-term perspective. Well, in the 50% tariff can add hundreds of dollars a ton, pricing some exports out. But the 400 billion guarantee, but it's going to give them liquidity and some credit support so that our steel makers can survive. But like Hyundai Steels, where they trying to make they made an announcement and they're going to establish their steel plant in the Louisiana in the U.S. The U.S. mainland, but we are not sure that how long it's going to take, how long they can manufacture those kind of steels in the U.S. soil. So in the short term, of course, it will help us help the steel industry to have some, basically to have some short-term solution, but I think in the long-term size, well, if it's gonna 50% U.S. tariff less, well, I think we're trying to find some more solutions so that we can eliminate, or at least we can minimize those kind of bad impact for the high percentage of U.S. tariff.
Right, so definitely there needs to be some long-term support for that. Now, on the UN General Assembly, many had hoped for progress on the tariff deal there, but we are aware as of now that there's no summit between President Trump and President Lee, and no tariff talks, of course, leading to that. So without that, how can we actually expect a breakthrough, Professor Kim?
I think, well, in the big picture, I think is the negotiation is done, but what they're working on is trying for more details. Like we're gonna make an investment, I think it's already decided. But when you're gonna make an investment as a Korean government side, well, how about the currency exchange? Well, basically we want to have some swap lines with the U.S., so we trying to have some safety when it's gonna make a bad impact on the Korean government, Korean's economy. Basically, we're gonna make an investment so that the Korea and the U.S. can have some win-win, have some synergy impact on the both economy as well as the overall economy. So I think it's kind of help Korea find some breakthrough. In addition, especially for the when they're going to have some breakthrough, I think, well, the regulation or we can have some support for the state level like Georgia. Well, basically, the U.S. government is going to be impacted by the Georgia, Alabama, Texas governors, of course, where they're trying to look for more jobs. But Korean companies, if they're gonna make an investment in those kind of the states, where I think our Korean government can get support from those kind of local government.
That would be definitely helpful. Now, on the other hand, President Trump and President Xi actually spoke on the 19th and said that they also raised hopes for easing the U.S.-China trade tensions. Professor Lee, what do you think pushed the two sides to start looking for some kind of common ground?
Well, I think the direct implication from those conversations from President Trump and Xi was that there are economic hardships from tariffs from both sides. American companies are facing hardship due to the tariff, where U.S. firms have to import in order to export to the rest of the world. And because of these tariffs, now we're seeing that some of the product prices are actually higher, and some of the competitive advantages for these U.S. firms are going down as a result of that. And at the same time, as you can imagine, China also has some of the interest in the U.S. economy, and so that economic hardship shared by the two countries has been a big factor for those more of an advanced talk. At the same time, both countries agree on the issue with fentanyl, which is a big issue in the United States about trying to stop the illegal imports of fentanyl into the United States, where China has been recognized as one of the major sources there. So, and I think both countries want to at least reduce that flows as well. Now, moving forward, this is not the first rodeo for both countries. U.S. and really China has already experienced the first trade war during the President Trump's first term. Now moving forward with President Xi's implications. Now, obviously the APEC summit is about a month away, so there a lot of things can happen. And especially with the TikTok sale, it's still unclear what will happen, especially whether or not there's going to be some U.S. interests and U.S. firm buying a share of the TikTok, the ByteDance. And now that's a big issue here in the United States. And that's going to be something we have to look forward to before the summit as a major issue in terms of the global investment affecting the United States and also in China.
Right. So when it comes to U.S.-China ties, small or big discussions are very important for the global trade landscape we're seeing. And in relation to that, actually, we're looking ahead to the APEC summit, and both President Trump and Xi are expected to be there. Professor Kim, do you think that meeting could mark a real turning point, not just for U.S.-China ties, but also for the global trade overall?
Of course, the trade war between the U.S. and China is basically the starting point for this kind of tariff war between the U.S. and China. So if the President Trump and President Xi they expect to meet in Korea in the APEC, of course, well, we are looking at from good signs when they're going to have some solutions regarding those kind of tariff issues. So for Korea's perspective, we are very interested in the semiconductors industry. Basically, due to those kind of issues, our semiconductor industry is kind of in the sandwich position between the U.S. and China. So those kind of the good sign or good, the gestures between the U.S. and China, basically, I think it's going to have some good signs for the U.S. economy, Korea economy, as well as the global economy, and it's going to be beneficial for the all over the world.
That will be a big picture outlook, and we will be watching closely whether APEC can actually set the tone for global trade going forward. I'm afraid we'll have to conclude our discussion here at this point. Thank you so much for your insights tonight, Professor Kim.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, Professor Lee, we appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Till then, stay informed and engaged.